Richard Dattner. I'm an architect in New York, and I'm the architect of this adventure playground here in Central Park.
And I'm gonna start with the big question. What is play?
Play is an interesting question. Play is doing what you want to do when you want to do it, not for any purpose or outcome, just for the freedom of moving your body, exercising your mind, your imagination. Think of it as the opposite of work. Work is aimed at a result, at earning a living, at practicing a craft, at ensuring an outcome. Play is really quite the opposite. It's a free expression of your ability to move through the world and imagine what you will, especially for a kid. Play is the way you learn about the world. You learn about how your body works, how the world works. You learn about gravity, about movement, about light, sunshine, rain, wind. You learn about everything through playing with the world. And a creative person, or any person in a creative activity, plays with ideas, plays with concepts, plays with different ways of approaching the problem or play is fun. What you want to do when you want to do it.
And can you tell us how you first became involved with making a venture playground? How did the Parks Department approach you, and what was your involvement like?
Uh, I was a young architect in New York, and I was working for a large cosmetics company, the Estee Lauder company, with whom I'm still doing projects with. They wanted to give back something to the city. The founder, Estee Lauder herself, felt that it would be nice to give something back to New York. She decided to gift a new playground, or a renovated playground, to the city. And because I had just designed their factory on Long Island, they asked me if I would be willing to design a playground. I was very enthusiastic about the idea. My wife is a clinical psychologist, and she directed me to the research about play, kids, Bruno Bettelheim, other psychologists, Piaget, who study the importance of play in children's development. And based on that philosophic framework, I started designing. The challenge in this playground, and in several others which I've designed around Central Park, is they had to be within the outline of an existing playground. This sort of football shape was a playground that was built under Robert Moses in the 1930s. It was one of 20, they were called peripheral playgrounds around the edges of Central Park. So this one had a bunch of beautiful trees in it, and my challenge was to design a creative playground within a very rigid existing framework. And that resulted in the shape that you see here. Circular concrete walls around existing trees. We are within the fence of the original playground. Nothing extends out into the park. The park and the landscape is preserved as it was since Olmsted's time. So the main philosophic and design underpinning of the park is to create a world for kids within these concrete walls that is visible to the parents who sit around the edges, but feels to the kids like a private world. Because kids are little, these walls are much bigger for them, and it gives them a sense that they are in their own private world. Where we're sitting now is an amphitheater. In the weather like this, in the winter. In the summer, this becomes a big spray fountain. And the water runs down this channel into a little pool at the bottom. Kids can float sticks and little paper boats down the channel. It's like a big river to them. At the other end is an area of sand, very soft and welcoming, and that's where kids do climbing. So they can jump off, or if they fall off, they fall onto a surface. The perimeter of the park is a rubberized soft surface, also very kid-friendly and safe. And all the features are built around these curvy concrete walls. The original park, and the reason it was called an adventure playground, was that because in the pyramid behind me, the original pyramid, it's been rehabilitated several times, but in 1966, when this park was originally opened, that pyramid was a hollow room. Inside the pyramid were a group of modular toys made out of plywood that the kids could take out. There was a play leader that would open up that pyramid in the morning, put play kits out for the kids, put out crayons and papers so the kids could create their own artwork. The kids could then assemble their own construction, which is really the essence of an adventure playground, is that part of the environment is also under the full control of the kids. And that lasted for many years. There's a committee that raises funds every year, and for the first 20 years or so of the playground, they paid for the play leader. That's no longer the case. It just got too expensive to pay for a person. So that part of the park is not here, but the fixed elements are all here, as they were at the beginning. The park has been beautifully renovated by the Central Parks Conservancy. So it lasts now, I guess, 48 years after, maybe 50.
I think it's 55 years.
58. 56 years after its original opening.
And so, but was the Estee Lauder reaction to making this a playground and giving back to the community a reaction to like the Battle of Central Park, and when Moses wanted to tear this place down
Yes.
to make
this
parking lot?
playground is famous because, in a way, it resulted really the beginning of the end of the absolute power of Robert Moses. Robert Moses, who deserves credit for an incredible collection of improvements to New York City. Dozens of parks, playgrounds, swimming pools, beautiful highways on Long Island, and also, unfortunately, a lot of unfortunate things. But at this playground, Moses had planned to bulldoze his original playground and build a parking lot for Tavern on the Green. And a group of mothers one morning saw a bulldozer here in the playground. And they asked the operator what was going on. He said, well, we're going to demolish the playground. They came here, the mothers, with their baby carriages, and they stopped the bulldozer from demolishing the playground. They started a campaign in the neighborhood and came here daily. Moses persisted in trying to do it. Ultimately, the neighborhood mothers were successful, and they stopped Moses. And just at that time, fortuitously, Estee Lauder said, well, this would be a great place to demonstrate a new approach to Central Park, not one of demolishing and building more parking lots, paving parking lot, and doing something much better for the environment. So this is a historic place of a kind of turning from an era of large-scale demolition to an area of more sensitive rebuilding of the park in its present form.
And what when you came to like, you're not trained, you weren't trained as a landscape architect. You never made a playground before, right? So
No.
like, what are your influences? What is speaking to you? Is it like other landscape architects? Is it like Isamu Noguchi was an influence as well? Could you talk about those influences you had on your design?
Sure. Yes, of course. I think there were three important uh, designers who influenced my work, in addition to the philosophic and psychological studies. Uh, One was Lady Allen of Hurtwood, a woman, landscape architect in England, who championed the cause of adventure playground. Another was Isamu Noguchi, who was working in New York, and with Louis Kahn, a great architect who was one of my great inspirations, had designed a park in Riverside Park, which was never built, but it was made out of earth forms rather than being a group of independent play features on a asphalt landscape. And the other is my colleague, Paul Friedberg. He and I were teaching in the School of Architecture at City College together. And Paul had recently finished the Jacob Riis Playground on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And that was a group of also earth forms with cobblestones and slides. It's a playground sadly no longer there. But those three individuals were very much an inspiration. And then my own sense of play. I mean, the first design for this playground, I got a bunch of clay and just started making earth forms in a shape which represented this playground, and putting sticks where the existing trees were, which we didn't want to touch, and seeing what kind of shapes would work well around this. And ultimately, then I moved to a cork model, and then to drawings, and ultimately to the park that you see here today, this many years later.
And I think you write about like how your approach to this playground was different than the Noguchi Khan approach, because they didn't seek like the community's input, but in your case, you did you realize that was like a missing link in it, and you sought that out? Or could you talk about how you brought the community into the involved?
Yeah, I mean, my firm, which is now been around New York for 56 years, 58 years. One of the things we feel is vital on every civic project, which is the heart of our practice, is to really involve the people who ultimately will be using it. So in this playground, as soon as I got the commission, I met with the local parents, and I met with the local kids, and solicited from them what they would like to see in a playground. What are the kinds of play that they like? What kind of features do they enjoy in other playgrounds? And I think all the parents felt, and I was at that time not yet a parent, that the playgrounds of the former era were dangerous. They were basically concrete or an asphalt slab with a slide, a swing, and a seesaw. Those were the three major components of most playgrounds. And if you fell off the slide, if a kid jumped off the seesaw while you were still on it, you could, have a great deal of damage. So the essence of listening to the parents' concerns, what the kids wanted, and to studying how to make a safe playground, and studying other models, particularly in Europe, which had a history of adventure playgrounds. After World War II, designers in Europe found that kids loved to play in rubble. They loved to play with pieces of wood or sticks or cobblestones or whatever that were left because they could build their own environment. And all those factors really coalesced into what became this initial adventure playground in Central Park. Over the following decade or so, I went on to design the water playground, the Heckscher playground, the lower end of Central Park, the Lewis and Bessie Adler at 71st Street and Fifth Avenue, the ancient play garden opposite the Metropolitan Museum, and the Wild West playground up at 100th Street in Central Park West. So a group of playgrounds all really following the same philosophy of respecting the existing park and building a new environment for creative play within the confines of what had been the original playground.
And now it's, half a century later, the park's still here, playground's still here, and most of your playgrounds are still here. But how did you see, throughout that time, did the deterioration and the Renaissance? Could you talk about how they still exist today, and maybe that journey from your perspective of did they fall into disrepair? Did they want to tear this down at some point, and then it was saved by I don't really know that story, so I'm trying to fill in 50 years of time.
There was a moment in time, maybe 25 years after this playground was built, that the normal wear and tear of a playground had taken place, and there was a discussion about possibly tearing it down and building a new playground. The local parents, some of whom had grown up in this playground, including people like Adrian Benefi, who became Parks Commissioner, very much wanted to preserve the playground. This playground has been renovated twice. The first time by the Central Parks Conservancy and funded by the Bloomberg Foundation. And the second time, maybe 10, 12 years ago, also by the Conservancy, again. And they were renovated for a couple of reasons. One was just to make up for normal wear and tear, which was not great because concrete lasts pretty well. The major reason is that there was an evolution of safety requirements. The federal government, when this park was initially built, I don't think there were any federally mandated safety requirements for playgrounds, which is why the old playgrounds just had a concrete or asphalt base that a kid could crack his head on. The evolution of the safety requirements, which are very important and valuable, resulted in some changes to playground design. And the two renovations took those requirements into account. So the current playground design complies with current play regulations.
And as opposed to, the seesaw and the slides and the jungle gym, can you talk about that quality of play that exists here versus maybe the less quality of play? What does this offer? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, versus a traditional Moses era asphalt playground.
This playground, this playground attempts to offer a whole cornucopia of activities for kids of different ages. And one of the ideas is uh, a series of graduated challenges. For example, at the climbing side of the south side of the park over sand, there are some features that little kids can manage. Other features require older kids. For example, the climbing pole. At the bottom, the rungs are close together. At the top, they're further apart. So the little kids can go a little ways up. They can't go all the way to the top. The big kids can climb on top and be playing really at a whole other layer. The two major play components, I think, for kids anywhere in the world are water and sand. And this playground has quantities of both. In warm weather, this becomes a river. There's a beautiful spray here. The kids can play in the water. They can slow things down this river. At the other end, there is sand. They can take buckets of water, mix it with the sand, build sand castles, do whatever they want. Little kids can sit for hours playing in the sand with the pails and water, while the big kids are doing other things to be above them. So all the different ages can coexist here really without getting in each other's way. There are physical challenges that older kids can do. For example, an older kid can navigate around the entire playground on top of these walls, jumping from one to the other without ever touching the ground. A little kid can't do that. They would have to go up and down to navigate around the playground. That's an example of some of the differences and play. Down at the south end, there is a volcano. The kids can come up, go into a tunnel, come up to a ladder. They can imagine that it is a volcano, it's a mountain, it could be a rocket ship, it could be the surface of the moon. There is a castle, which is a group of concentric concrete circles where kids can make believe they're defending a fort. Everything is abstract and really a template for a kid's imagination. There are no identifiable creatures here. There's nothing that says I'm a dinosaur or a structure that says I'm a fire engine. Everything is meant to be abstract enough so any kid can imagine anything with any feature. To some kids, this can be an arena. For other kids, it can be a fortress. For other kids, it can be an Indian dwelling to defend against somebody or other. So everything is a canvas for a kid's imagination to paint on it whatever they want, rather than an adult telling a kid, hey kid, this is a fire engine, that's a rocket ship, you got to do this, you got to do that. The slide is a very wide slide on the pyramid or on the volcano. A kid can go up, look at the slide, decide that maybe today's not the day to go down that slide. It looks too scary. And they can back off and live to go another day. The old-fashioned slides, once you got to the top of the ladder, that was it. There were 3 kids behind you, and you couldn't say, excuse me, I don't think I'm going to go down today. They'd probably shove you down the slide. So everything is about child's own choice, how to move, how to interpret, how to visualize, and how to use this place rather than the former prescriptive playground. It said, here is a swing. All you can do is swing. Here's a seesaw, and there's where you sit. And here is a slide. You've got to go down, and that's all you can do.
And,
Yeah.
so I have a few more questions.
Yeah.
But so Susan writes about like in her book American Playgrounds. She writes like how there was a period in the when you built this where like playgrounds became art. Like I'm sorry, like art influenced the design of playgrounds. Could you talk about maybe that environment at that time? Like how was art influencing you and Paul Friedberg and and obviously Noguchi was influencing. Like, what was that like? It must have been an exciting period of time.
I think designers, architects are always interested beyond the function of what they design to the aesthetics. And, I think Noguchi and Paul Friedberg and myself are very fascinated by form, by the way forms look. That's my son, Ben.
Okay.
And we try to make a visual confabulation of interest. We want to design our own works of art. We're not under the impression that we're artists, but we do like to play with form. One of the great things about being a designer is to play. And one of the reasons I have loved being an architect is I get to play with form. Hey, Ben, I thought I'd run into you. This is Darren.
Hi.
My son, Ben.
Nice to meet you. How's it going? What's this for?
I make videos about parks and playgrounds.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want to feature my grandson?
Let's see if I can find him. I'm not sure he's there, but I'll go look.
Okay.
So Ben played in this playground, lives across the street.
And your influence, like, I think now there was a period, like, when, like, you built this, which was a really special time, influenced by the Noguchi's, maybe, like, ideas that he had for this and, for Riverside Park and other playgrounds. But I think nowadays there was, like, a renaissance in, like, playground design with, like, battery playscapes, like Domino Park.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that and your influence on the design of playgrounds nowadays?
If I've had any influence on play design, I'm very pleased and honored. I think in every generation there are new investigations. I'm very fond of the playgrounds like Paul Friedberg did at 67th Street on the east side of the park, which really embraces nature, and the ones that Michael Van Valkenburg has done in Battery Park and in Brooklyn Bridge Park. I think that's a wonderful development in park design. And it's something we could not do here because we were limited to the perimeter of the existing playground, but I think it's great. I think in every generation there are new approaches, but some things are cyclical. Like there's a whole new generation of young parents who suddenly realized the importance of play. And one thing I actually would like to say, the biggest difference between the time when I designed this playground and now is the digital world we now live in and the kids live in. And I see that with my grandchildren. They probably spend as much time on digital media as they do outdoors in a playground. And that's, I think, not a great thing. I think it's something that designers need to deal with, and I think especially it's something that parents need to deal with. I think the digital world is wonderful. It's made our lives convenient. It's allowed you to make a film on a phone, but it also, for kids, has set up a filter between them and the real world, which can be very, very damaging. And I see it in my own architectural firm. Young architects who are now trained on the computer, some of them don't even have skills of drawing. anymore. And drawing, and the same thing happens with play, is a much more direct connection between your brain and the outside environment. The digital world, as convenient as it is, and as magical as it is in a sense, is another filter between you and reality. It allows you to do many things, but it also makes you a step removed, one more step removed from the real world. You can't capture the beauty of this day today, one of the great days of this year, unless you're really here. And a kid can't appreciate something like this unless he can actually catch one of these leaves on the way down from the tree and hold it up to the sun and deal with the beauty of the real world. So that's a challenge for design, is to really, in a sense, to make up for the filter of the digital world by somehow bringing a kid closer to the real world, as to make up for the digital filter.
And do you have a favorite part about this particular playground?
Favorite part?
Yeah, a favorite aspect of it.
No, I like the whole thing. I like coming here at different times of the year, especially with my grandchildren, and seeing what they like to do. One of the great researchers on the psychology of play and children's development was the Swiss psychologist Piaget. And his research was really done by watching kids play, simply watching them. I'm looking for my grandson, but he's not.
I haven't seen him come back.
No,
Come back yet.
no. So what else, Darren?
Why are parks? This is the last question. Why are parks and playgrounds so important to the city of New York?
Well, parks have always been important to the city of New York. But Central Park is a great example of that. In 1865, we live in an increasingly man-made, concrete, and now digital world. Parks, because they are a slice of nature within the confines of the city, they've been characterized as the lungs of the city. During the COVID pandemic, parks have become even more important. There was a time when people couldn't leave their homes, their apartments, except for going out into nature, into the park. And I go into a park every day. There is the psychologists are aware of a phenomenon called biophilia, which is the love of nature. And an hour spent in the natural setting calms you, where an hour spent on the subway or walking down Lexington Avenue with the cacophony of cars and trucks and everything else can make you crazy. So, parks are essential, and I think the city of New York is aware of that. And more citizen groups have taken on stewardship of the park. I'm a trustee of Fort Tryon Park in my neighborhood, which you should come visit. I think it's the most beautiful park in New York, on the Hudson River. And every day, my neighbors and I, when we can, go there and appreciate, the beauty of what nature gives us.
That's all I have.
Good.